Welcome back to Kentucky Sports Television. Joining us now on Skype is Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News. Mike, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you. I guess we'll start with big news of the day. Nerlens Noel out now with a torn ACL for Kentucky. What was your reaction to hearing the news that Nerlens' season was over?
Well, when I saw what happened on Tuesday night, my first reaction was just hoping. My first reaction was that in my mind he was going to be done for the year, and I was just hoping that for his sake it would be, say, a dislocated kneecap with minor ligament damage, and that he'd be back for himself in a month or 2 or 3 or whatever, and not that he would have to go through the protracted rehabilitation that's involved with an ACL. Unfortunately, that's what it turned out to be. But I from the moment that it occurred on Tuesday night, and what the reactions were in terms of his teammates and Nerlens himself, I had very little doubt that he played his last second for Kentucky this season.
What does this do for their team? I think, you could go either way, I guess, coming into this game. They either looked like they were coming together or they looked a little out of sorts as they headed in to play a very good Florida team. But how much does this change Kentucky now, and how concerned should UK fans be for their chances in the postseason now that he's out?
Well, I think that any concern at this point is legitimate because they're going to be an entirely different team. Nerlens was, if you play as a starter, more or less you're 20% of the team. But anyone who thinks that Nerlens was only 1/5 of that team is kidding themselves. He was by far the engine of that team, the driving force, especially at the defensive end. His energy was maybe the best quality of this basketball team. And to be absent that, it's going to be very difficult for Kentucky to reinvent itself in a short amount of time. With Nerlens, they always had the knowledge that they had special talent and special ability, and that if they could continue riding that, even though they didn't have great achievement from a standpoint of high-level victories and that sort of thing, they were going to probably have significant numbers of victories by the end of the year and would be in the proximity of making the field. And now, without him, even if they're able to gather some momentum back, the committee will look at them as diminished and damaged and maybe not feel the same way about having them in the field. So it's really a tough situation. They have to get an incredible amount of momentum in a very short period of time, all with a completely reimagined approach. It's a lot to ask.
Kentucky's a team that they fell apart at the end of the game last night after Nerlens went out, and they're a very close group. Is it fair, you think, to say that now going forward their biggest battle is going to be mental, trying to get past losing their teammate and maybe the most important part of the team, trying to overcome that mentally? Because they've struggled this season trying to challenge themselves in that regard. Is that their biggest challenge, you think?
Honestly, I think that it's challenged because of what he meant in terms of his energy. But I think the biggest problems are technical, or what kind of team are you now? Before you could count on Nerlens to erase a lot of defensive mistakes. Willie Cauley-Stein is a fine shot blocker. He's not Nerlens. There just aren't very many guys like Nerlens. There haven't been very many guys like him in the last 20 years. So you lose that, you have to become a completely different team. Do you try to play more zone? What do you do? And Coach Cal and his staff all have to sort of try to figure out what approach do you take with what you have left, and they have to do it in such a hurry. It's really a challenge for them, but I think it's much more technical than it is mental. Although the problems this team already had in terms of psychology, in terms of being connected to the game plan, being energetic enough, being confident enough, those don't go away, and you lose what Nerlens did to cover for that. But at the same time, I think the most important thing is, how do you play? What kind of team are you now?
Is it fair to blame? I know this is going to be used as an example in the argument of the one-and-done rule against it, because Nerlens, of course, could be in the NBA right now. Is it fair to criticize that rule that makes guys go to 1 year of college in regards to Nerlens' injury?
Well, first of all, it doesn't make them do anything. They could sit out and train for a year if they wanted. They could play in the D League. They're allowed to do that. They could go overseas and play for a decent amount of money, and that's available to them too. They choose to go to college because it's offered for the last 75 years the best training for the NBA and other professional leagues. It's offered an education as well. It's offered great marketing in terms of making Nerlens Noel a household name instead of just a kid on a recruiting list. It does all those things for young players. If Nerlens had been injured walking across the street, would we be arguing that players shouldn't be allowed to cross streets? If he'd gone pro this year and then played in summer league and hurt himself there, would we be arguing to outlaw the summer league? There are so many ways a young person can be injured. You simply can't bubble wrap these guys and then bring them out on game night. It doesn't work like that. There are risks. Could you take better care of a player like Nerlens Noel? Well, you could start by giving him and everyone else a stipend that the NCAA membership shot down after originally it was improved. That was a disgrace. Could you allow Nerlens Noel to get some money from an agent or from some endorsements or this or that? I'm open to listening about that. I'm not totally closed off to that. But the idea that the NBA has to invite teenagers to play in its league that are absolutely untrained to play basketball at that level, just because they're nice kids or whatever, that's not a good enough argument. The NBA has a business to protect. There are a couple of elements that we're hurting. One, they couldn't train the players. You can't. It's basically like taking a kid out of the high school band and putting him in the London Symphony Orchestra and saying, "Hey, catch up." The second thing was that they were turning off a very significant number of basketball fans in this country who hated the fact that a generation of players from LeBron James to Kobe Bryant and everybody else never played in college. They like the progression of players from one step to the next to the next. And turning off basketball fans when your business is to sell basketball isn't smart. So there were a number of things that they considered in doing this. I'd rather the age limit be a little higher, and I'd rather the players be better taken care of. I don't think that completely eliminating and allowing high school graduates back in the league is the answer.
Excellent stuff. Mike DeCourcy, Sporting News, thank you very much for joining us. We always enjoy talking with you, and hopefully we can do it again before the season's over.
Anytime. Thanks very much.
That's our show for tonight. Be sure to tune in tomorrow night when Gary Parrish from CBSSports.com stops by. Talk about maybe he's still picking Kentucky to go to the Final Four. We'll see. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter and anytime on Channel 103 On Demand.